Good evening and welcome to the Eden Prairie Planning Commission meeting on Monday, March 9th, 2015. Please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
So, the first item we have on the agenda tonight is the approval of the agenda. Do we have any adjustments to the agenda? If not, I'll listen for a motion.
I'll move to accept the agenda.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Our next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes, but since we do not have a quorum tonight, we will postpone that until the next meeting for approval of the minutes of the February 23rd Planning Commission meeting. And the agenda is a little bit light tonight in that we have no public hearings, so we're going to move on down to the planner's report. Regina, do you want to introduce the planner's report?
Good evening, Chair. Tonight we have Leslie Stoverine, our environmental coordinator. She's going to provide a presentation on the land alteration section of the city code. In your packets, you received a clean copy of the ordinance and a copy which showed the proposed changes, and Leslie will give you an overview of the purpose, the proposed changes, and a timeline for approval of the ordinance. No action is requested tonight. That will come, I believe, next month.
Sounds good. Leslie, please take us through.
Hi. Well, I'm here just to give everybody a quick update on some of the things that are going on with our water programs, and in particular, our update for our stormwater permit program. So basically, the main reason I'm here is because there was a major update to our stormwater permit program in 2013. And one of the main requirements was to update our stormwater pollution prevention plan, as well as which includes our stormwater regulations. So on April 3rd, 2014, our application for renewal of our stormwater permit was approved and coverage was extended. And there's a whole bunch of items that were required to be completed by April 2015. And these included things like a high priority education topic determination. Basically, we're to set up areas that we believe are important for our residents to understand about stormwater. We need to do an illicit discharge detection and response plan. This includes writing a new plan to address, identify, and remediate any illicit discharges that are identified in the city. And it also includes staff training. All personnel who work in the field are to receive training on how to identify and report illicit discharges. This includes everything from the planning staff to assessing to fire to police to utilities, engineering, so just basically about everybody in the city who goes outside. Another one is an emergency response program. This is to that if we see anything like erosion control is failing, or there are any other procedures, that we have a written procedure for staff to follow if they see something. We are in the process of doing a priority area identification plan. This is going to be to set up areas within the city that we feel have a higher potential for illicit discharges and to inspect them more frequently. And then, of course, our stormwater pollution prevention plan needs to be updated. So once we get all those other pieces done, including the facilities inventory, which is inventorying all the city facilities, that will all come together in a new pollution prevention plan. And then, of course, the reason that we're here is our stormwater rules update. And then what will be coming next, which I'll talk about later, is our local water management plan update. So why are we here? The stormwater rules need to be updated because the permit requires the city to update our post-construction stormwater management program. So basically, what happens after the construction site is done and going forward, what's going to look like, how is it going to operate 10, 20, 30 years from now? This is only required for projects with land disturbance of greater than or equal to 1 acre in size. And this includes, they put in this catchy little phrase, it includes projects that are less than 1 acre that are part of a larger common plan of development or sale. And how the city is supposed to track that, I am not sure. They didn't really give any guidance on that. But it is intended that if a developer comes in and buys 2 half-acre parcels and tries to get away without getting a permit for those parcels, but he's developing them together and selling them together, or selling them together, he's supposed to get a permit. But how would we know until it's already done? So it's kind of one of those nifty little things they put in there that we're unsure how we're going to deal with that. And then, of course, the stormwater rules have to meet or exceed the state construction permit requirements. One thing to recognize is this has absolutely nothing to do with the watershed district rules that just recently went through. This is totally independent of that. Once we do our local water management plan update, we will take a look at that and determine whether we need to do another adjustment to either meet or incorporate those rules. So here's the timeline. We already gave a quick briefing to the council in February, and we're planning on bringing this for a public hearing on April 13th. And then on May 5th would be the city council's first reading. And then May 19th, if we don't receive a lot of comments, we would do a second reading in May. If we receive a lot of comments that require a lot of revisions, obviously we would have to push that out. So what has changed? Basically, we reorganized a lot of the section, which is why it was kind of tricky putting together a red line copy for you, because really if we did a true red line, it would basically be all red almost. So, because the city attorney asked that we look at putting the process and the procedures in more, logical series. So we moved a lot of stuff around. We also looked at putting most of the tree replacement requirements into its own independent subdivision or section within this city code section, so that if in the future they decide to take that out and put it in its own separate city code section, it'd be very easy to take it out. And then, of course, the last time we did an update was in 2006. So there are going to be a lot of terminology changes, both because of the new permit and just the way things are done in the stormwater world. Process improvements, clarifications of rules as after dealing with it so long, and updating definitions. And then also a few things on processing. We're adding an expiration date for land alteration permits, which currently there really isn't one. And then also looking at how the activities go together for construction. The newest section, which is completely new, is this section on stormwater management standards and design criteria. So this is where we need to incorporate requirements for infiltration or volume control. The MPCA has determined that volume is a pollutant because it captures so much sediment. Nutrient management, which is phosphorus and suspended sediment. And then also the basic requirements in the permit are that new development is to have no net increase in any of these, and redevelopment is to have a net decrease. The good part is that they didn't say how much. So it could be 0.0001%, and it would meet their requirements. So, and the reason that, I was on the committee that really struggled with the MPCA in writing this permit. The reason we wanted that in there is because what if a site like the Cargill Foundation has a wonderful site, they basically are doing everything they can do. If they came in for redevelopment, how in the world would they make it better? So we wanted to make sure that if a really good site comes in for redevelopment, that it isn't too onerous for them to do it. And I think it at least did accomplish that. So for the infiltration, there are a series of prohibitions, restrictions, exceptions, and then mitigation. The prohibitions are basically areas where we are saying you absolutely cannot do infiltration. And this is straight out of the stormwater permit, so it is required by state rules. If an industrial permit does not allow infiltration, obviously we would not want them infiltrating. It's in a vehicle fueling or maintenance area. It's within 50 feet of a municipal well where there's less than 3 feet separation from the saturated soils or top of bedrock, or there are known environmental contaminants. And basically, if a developer is asking for a prohibition, they would need to provide the evidence documenting that. For restrictions, this is where we would say if you have one of these conditions, you need to do additional engineering analysis to determine if it could impact the groundwater, if it's likely to impact the groundwater. This is basically from the Minnesota Department of Health. They're very protective of the groundwater, obviously, and they really wanted some of these provisions in there to make sure we were taking a close look at them. One of them, within a drinking water supply management area, right now almost 2/3 of our city is in what's called the DWISMA. So most of our city, the north 2/3, would require additional analysis to make sure that the infiltration does not impact the groundwater. And of course, if there's historic vehicle fueling or maintenance activities, we want to make sure there's no contamination there. Within 50 feet of a salt storage area, salt is very mobile. We would not want to be transporting it to the groundwater. And again, if it has very low or very high infiltration rates, if it's more than 8.3 inches per hour, obviously we want to make sure that that's not a fast conduit down to our groundwater or drinking water supply. And if it's very low, very heavy clays, obviously it just may be impossible for it to do infiltration. And there are also some exceptions, and the main one for us is a linear project with limited right-of-way. That would include trails, roads, anything where there's limited right-of-way. It does give us the ability to say we just can't provide infiltration. However, we must provide a reasonable attempt to obtain right-of-way during the planning process. And then, of course, the exceptions are if the restrictions are such that it just can't, we should not be doing infiltration. So then what happens is if you can't do infiltration, then you go into the mitigation. And this must be completed on site. And the good part about it is it's to the maximum extent practicable, which is a federal term definition. It's meant to be a little bit vague, which is supposed to provide us more flexibility. And the first thing they have to do is look at green infrastructure. In fact, for any development, the first thing they need to do is look at green infrastructure, rain gardens, infiltration swales, green roofs, green walls, kind of all that fun thing. And then also they need to, for mitigation, look at filtration. They need to look at filtration swales or devices. It might be in a rain garden, but it has drain tile underneath it, which would capture it and take it to the stormwater system rather than letting it infiltrate. It could be capturing and reusing stormwater for irrigation. It could be increasing the buffer around a wetland. It could be, a number of things. They just would have to provide the information on how they want to do it. And then if there's a gap, if we feel there is a gap, we could work with them on getting a payment in lieu of so that we can start working on developing infiltration banks for developers. It's one we're still working on. Now the next one, of course, is nutrient management. And this is the total suspended solids, which is basically dirt in the water, and total phosphorus. They are required to do as much nutrient management on site to the MEP. However, if they can't do it on site, now they are required to do mitigation. So the mitigation can be completed off-site. The preference is to be in the same watershed, the same receiving water that would receive water from the construction site. But at a minimum, it has to be in the city. And they do give kind of like a series of steps that you're supposed to go through in the same watershed, in the same, there's like 4 different places you're supposed to look at before you can say in the city. And it also has to be completed within 24 months of the start of construction. So it's a pretty tight time frame, so they would definitely, as part of their review process, want to identify and, if needed, purchase property to do the mitigation on, because obviously that can be very time consuming. They can submit payment in lieu of. However, then this forces the city into those same restrictions. We would have to complete the mitigation area within 24 months of the start of construction. The one nice thing about Eden Prairie, if I can toot our horn a little bit, is we have already started our stormwater system inventories, which basically means we've been going out and identifying and mapping our stormwater ponds to determine which ponds are filling with sediment, which watersheds have less stormwater treatment capacity than would be desirable. So we're already starting to identify some areas that could potentially be used for mitigation. And a number of these are on city property, and some of them are on private property, and some of them are on MnDOT property or Hennepin County property. So at least we should have some kind of a database available to work with with developers on this. Not every city has gone through that exercise yet. In fact, it's a new part of the permit. We just had already started early, and we've already got, probably almost half of the city done by now. So. And then I thought I'd give you a quick update so you can see what else is going on. Like I said, our local water management plan. Right now we are planning to have an open house joint meeting with the Conservation Commission May or June of this year. The draft is then sent out for review to the Metropolitan Council and the watershed districts. They give the Met Council less time because they want the watershed districts to be able to see the Met Council comments before they finish theirs. And then we would adopt this plan once all the comments are received and incorporated summer, fall 2015, depending on the extent of the comments that are received. And then at that time, like I said, we would look at our ordinance and determine, one, do we need to make any changes? Do we want to look at the watershed district rules? What do we want to do? It may not need any changes at all. And then the last thing that you might hear of that really has absolutely nothing to do with the Planning Commission. But last summer we had a lot of high water events, and we ended up having to close a couple of our lakes to boating for a while. And the only reason we were able to do that is because we got an emergency order from the DNR to allow us to do that. And we have decided we want to be more proactive than that. And so we are going to be establishing a no-wake ordinance for Bryant, Riley, and Starring. Now, Starring may seem like an oddball to do that with, but right now the Watershed District is doing a carp removal project there, and our anticipation is that the water quality in Starring Lake is going to improve, if not dramatically improve, within the next few years, in which case, historically, it has been a fairly popular lake. There's a nice boat landing there. If the fish population is reestablished, that could open it up for opportunities, and we want to make sure that that's available to protect our outdoor center and the parks and all that. So right now there's a public hearing on March 31st, and then it goes to the DNR for review for 120 days. And then after the comments are received and final revisions are made, it would be adopted by the City Council. Now for Lake Riley, of course, since it straddles between two cities, Chanhassen will also have to provide a no-wake ordinance that would match with ours so that we could, it has to be over the whole lake. So, and that's it. Any questions?
Well, thank you for the presentation. Commissioners? Do we have any questions? Who wants to start it off?
I have a question about process to you. I'm wondering whether or if the city staff process involves at some point an opportunity to visit with folks who have been part of stormwater management on behalf of their development in the past, who might have some interest in or be obviously potentially affected if they're going to be back doing more development in the future or in some other venue, so that folks who are in the private sector have some opportunity to reflect on what's being proposed for changes in
Well, there will be a public hearing, of course, and we
Right.
would make sure that we get a good notice out for that and probably an article in the paper and let people know it. We've been letting people know it's coming.
okay.
Part of the problem is that the bulk of the new stuff is required and we can't really change the language. It's all straight out of our stormwater permit. So unfortunately, I know that there are going to be headaches with the developer community, to be quite honest, but unfortunately, we're kind of in a bind.
To build on that question, I'm assuming that what our stormwater permit and neighboring communities
Yes.
pretty consistent. In other words, what we're doing here is not that much different from, Minnetonka or Hopkins or somebody, Bloomington.
No, and what I did was when I started looking at how to revise ours, I got draft ordinances from the MPCA, from Woodbury, the League of Minnesota Cities, and kind of took those and used those to help develop ours. So yes, it's not going to be just us. That's the good part about it, is like every city with a stormwater permit, which is basically everyone in the metro area, will have to have these requirements, and they have to be legally enforceable. The
Okay.
only problem with this stormwater permit update is that the MPCA was supposed to get us guidance, but they never did. They were kind of leaving us at our own devices, so it's been kind of unfortunate. They did give some comments on the League of Minnesota Cities proposed draft ordinance. They did give some comments on that, which was helpful, but they've been pretty silent, so it'll be interesting to see if what we do is satisfying or not. So,
Other questions? I'll throw out a couple that I jotted down as you were presenting. That one area where you talked about redevelopment and a net decrease. And understand, the logic behind not having a rigid number in there. I think your point was well taken, and one that, just came in front of the Planning Commission within the last few months, so very understandable. On the other hand, if it truly is a net decrease, do we as the city, whether it be planning or whoever, have any kind of guidance or goals or targets that we might give to developers in that circumstance? Or are we really leaving it in the hands of the developer completely?
well, I think one of the keys is now that we have the infiltration, volume management, and in the city code, which wasn't there previously. It was a guideline before, except for 9 Mile Creek. I think the developers being required to meet those will really help with that part of it. So I think as long as we're making sure that they are to the fullest extent possible doing that, we should be able to meet the intent of this.
So you're saying by having that in the code will drive them to some hopefully measurable decrease? Because, we got to be honest, somebody may say, as you said, 0.1% decrease, where if they did reasonable things, they could have a greater decrease. And you're saying the ordinance will drive them a little bit towards needing to do those anyway?
I believe so. Do you agree, Rod? And again, it's new, so
Yeah,
we
I
might be back
understand.
here in a year and changing it, so.
I have a question in regard to that. I noticed it as well on the no net increase, or in the redevelopment case, the net decrease in pollutants. Do the developers or whomever is working on these efforts bring that data to the city for us to examine and decide whether we believe they have done the things that are achieving these results? Do we double check them? Technically, it must be a very involved process, I would guess, but I don't really know. So I guess I just wonder if you could explain it a little bit, what in fact has to be done in order to demonstrate whether it's a very small decrease or small or no net increase. How do we measure that to be sure we have accomplished what we're looking for?
Well, during the development review process, so with the application, they would need to provide the grading plan and the stormwater calculations, and the city would review them. If it was a really complicated site, we may ask for assistance with one of our outside consultants, but basically we review most of this in-house.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions, or you pretty comfortable with it? Very nice presentation. It was
Thank you.
interesting, and very happy to see this because reading through the ordinance was interesting.
It's a good bedtime reading.
Yeah, no, it's always tough. It's always tough to do something like that. So this answered a lot of questions just with your presentation. We appreciate it very much. Okay, with that, Regina, anything more from the planner's report?
I don't have anything additional to add.
Okay.
Thank you.
Members' report.
I'm on the Community Advisory Committee. There was a meeting, but that's a standing agenda item, and I'm going to hold my update for the next meeting.
Okay, very good. So moving forth quickly, continuing business, new business. If not, do we have a motion for adjournment?
Move to adjourn the Planning Commission meeting.
I'll second the motion.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting adjourned.